Hey everyone, it's Professor Clark. In this lecture, we are going to learn how to conjugate first conjugation verbs. Russian has two conjugation types. So once again, this is easier than a lot of Romance languages, which might have three. Russian just has two. Now, don't get cocky. I don't want you thinking that Russian is actually easier, because the more we get into verbs, the more you're going to realize that it is not. But in this particular way, it is easier than many Western European languages, especially Romance languages, because it only has two conjugation types. They are called, very imaginatively, first conjugation and second conjugation. They have the same actual endings, but they differ by the vowel markers used in the non-past tense, and we'll get into that later, what that actually means. First conjugation is more common than second conjugation. They're both pretty common, but first conjugation is probably, just pulling a number out of my hat here, twice as common as second conjugation. So we learn first conjugation first. First conjugation can have two types. Two different types of verbs can have first conjugation. Those are vowel stems and consonantal stems. And these vowel stems are the more common. So vowel stem first conjugation verbs are by far the biggest class of verbs. So if you are ever in doubt, just guess that your verb is a first conjugation vowel stem verb, because you are more likely to be correct than if you guess something else. And what a vowel stem means is that we are going to add endings to a vowel. That vowel is normally going to be ah, but sometimes it might be ya or yeah. And then we'll learn later that there's a whole class of verbs where that vowel is oo, but by far the most common is going to be ah. So let's look at this chart. And again, we break it up into first person, second person, third person, and singular and plural. First person singular, so the ya form. We are going to drop the temjachiznak and add u to the vowel, which is almost always going to be a. So izuchat, to study, becomes ya izuchayu. If you hear like weird noises in the background, someone's doing a big construction project next door, so there's like beeping and all kinds of stuff clunking going on. I apologize in advance if I can't edit it all out. But going back to our ya form, понимать, to understand, becomes я понимаю. We drop the temjachiznak and we add you. Second person singular, the ты form is ешь when it's not under stress, which is the most common, and ёшь when it is under stress. So изучать becomes ты изучаешь. Понимать becomes ты понимаешь. Third person singular, so the on она form, is ет when it is not under stress, which is the most common, and ёт when it is under stress. Изучать becomes она изучает. Понимать becomes кто понимает, who understands. The мы form, the first person plural, is ем or yom. Again, the stress rules come into effect, so ем, unstressed ending, yom, stressed ending. So we have мы изучаем, мы понимаем. And then the вы form, the second person plural, is ете or йоте. Вы изучаете, вы понимаете. And finally, the они form, the third person plural, is ют. Они изучают. Они понимают. The other type of first conjugation ending are for consonantal stems, where we add the endings directly to a consonant. And those are going to be a little different in the first person singular, the ya form, and the third person plural, the они form. All the others will be exactly the same. Some common examples of this consonantal stem are писать, to write, and жить, to live. And note, when we conjugate them, how something funky happens. We don't just chop off the te miakiznak. There's some kind of mutation where the consonant changes or a consonant suddenly appears. So when we say pisat, and then we conjugate it, we say ya pishu. We drop off the whole sat and we change it to shu. That sa changes to sh. Just like in English, we say face, facial. It's exactly the same pronunciation change. In Russian, pisat, pishu. I write. Or жить, to live. We remove the ending, the te miakiznak ending for the infinitive, and a v appears. Я живу. Why? Because it does. In the second person singular, the the form, we have the same endings that we do for vowel stems. So yes, yosh. Pisat becomes the pishish. Notice the stress shift. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Жить becomes the живешь. Notice that it is end stressed, so we use this yosh form, ты живешь. For the on она form, the third person singular, we have едет again. Писать, он пишет, he writes. Жить, она живет, she lives. And then мы, the first person plural, we have ем йом again. Мы пишем, we write. Мы живем, we live. For вы, the second person plural, we have едете again. Вы пишете, you write. Вы живете, you live. And then for third person plural, for the они form, it is going to be ut rather than ют. So они пишут, they write. Они живут, they live. And finally, let's talk about stress patterns. So people get really worked up in the beginning about endings in Russian. Endings are not the hard part. The hard part are stress patterns and shifting stress. And it might seem straightforward at the moment, or, you're so overwhelmed by the endings that you're like, oh my God, stress, whatever. But stress is super important in Russian, and it's much less predictable than endings generally are. That being said, there are 3 stress patterns for the non-pastive verbs, so it's not like there's 17 or something. There's just 3. The question is just which one to use. And you can't always know by looking at the infinitive. In fact, a lot of the times you can't know by looking at the infinitive. You just have to memorize them on a verb-by-verb basis. So that's where the trouble comes in. The most common type of stress pattern by far, so when in doubt, go with this, is the stress is fixed on the stem. It never moves. An example would be понимать, to understand, and we say я понимаю, ты понимаешь, она понимает, мы понимаем, вы понимаете, они понимают. The stress stays fixed on that ah throughout. We can also have a fixed end stress, where the stress is always on the ending. That is less common, but there are a number of important verbs, especially these monosyllabic verbs, where that happens. So жить, to live, becomes живу, живешь, живет, живем, живете, живут. The stress is always fixed on the ending. And then the one that really gets people is this shifting stress, where the stress is on the ending in the ya form, and then it shifts one syllable towards the beginning in the other forms. So писать, to write. Я пишу. The stress is on the second syllable. Ты пишешь. The stress switches, or it shifts, to the first syllable. It moves one syllable towards the beginning of the verb. Он пишет. Мы пишем. Вы пишете. Они пишут. Notice that we have the stress on the second syllable in the ya form and the first syllable in all the other forms. And there's no way that we could have known that from the infinitive. Понимать, писать both have this stressed at ending in the infinitive, but one of them has a fixed stress in the conjugated form, and the other has a shifting stress in the conjugated form, and you just have to know that. So with that somewhat ominous ending to this lecture, we'll stop now and maybe take a little time to de-stress and then digest everything that you've just been slammed with. It might seem like a lot, but again, try to expose yourself to authentic materials and see this being used in its native habitat as much as possible, and it will start to seem more regular and predictable to you.